Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Parujikacharya Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Parujikacharya Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Jai. Okay, this is going to be a little bit too much. Narayan Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirihe. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this first day of August, 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. In Canto 5, the Creative Impetus, Chapter 1, the activities of Maharaj Priyavrata, text number 38. So I will chant the Sanskrit and then we'll read word by word these many synonyms. Paradevata prasadhadikatatma pratyavamarsenanu putebhya imam hitadayam vibhajya bhukta bhogam tamahishim mitrakam ivasaha mahavabhutim apahaya swayam nihita nirvedo vidigrihita haribiharanubhavo bhagavato naradasya padavim punarevanusasara. Paradevata of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prasada, by the mercy. Adhigata, obtained. Atma pratyavamarshena, by self-realization. Anupravrittebhyaha, who exactly follow his path. Putrebhyaha, unto his sons. Imam, this earth. Yatadayam, exactly according to the inheritance. Vibhajya, dividing. Bhukta bhogam, whom he enjoyed in so many ways. Cha, also. Mahishim, the queen. Mritakam, Eva, exactly like a dead body. Saha, with. Mahavabhutim, great opulence. Apahaya, giving up. Swayam, himself. Nihita, perfectly taken to. Nirvedaha, renunciation. Riddhi, in the heart. Grihita, accepted. Hari, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vihara, pastimes. Anubhavaha, in such an attitude. Bhagavata, of the great saintly person. Naradasya, of Saint Narada. Padavim, position. Punaha, again. Eva, certainly. Anusasara, began to follow. Translation. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Priyavrata reawakened to his senses. He divided all his earthly possessions among his obedient sons. He gave up everything, including his wife, with whom he had enjoyed so much sense gratification, and his great and opulent kingdom, and he completely renounced all attachment. His heart, having been cleansed, became a place of pastimes for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus he was able to return to the path of Krishna consciousness, spiritual life, and resume the position he had attained by the grace of the great saint Narada. Purport. As enunciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshashtaka, Cheto Darpanamarjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. As soon as one's heart is cleansed, the blazing fire of material existence is immediately extinguished. Our hearts are meant for the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This means that one should be fully Krishna conscious, thinking of Krishna, as he himself advises. Manmana bhavaman bhakto madhyajimnam namaskuru. This should be our only business. One whose heart is not clean cannot think of the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Lord. But if one can once again place the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his heart, he very easily becomes qualified to renounce material attachment. Mayavadi philosophers, yogis and jnanis, try to give up this material world simply by saying, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. This world is false. There is no use of it. Let us take to Brahman. Such theoretical knowledge will not help us. If we believe that Brahman is the real truth, we have to place within our hearts the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, as Maharaj Ambarish did. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Bindayo. One has to fix the lotus feet of the Lord within his heart. Then he gets the strength to be freed from material entanglement. Maharaj Priyavrata was able to give up his opulent kingdom, and he also gave up the association of his beautiful wife as if she were a dead body. However beautiful one's wife and however attractive her bodily features, one is no longer interested in her when her body is dead. We praise a beautiful woman for her body, but that same body, when bereft of a spirit soul, is no longer interesting to any lusty man. Maharaj Priyavrata was so strong by the grace of the Lord that even though his beautiful wife was alive, he could give up her association exactly like one who is forced to give up the association of a dead wife. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, Nadanang najanang nasundarim kapitam va jagadish kamaye mama janmani janmanishware bhavata bhakti dahaituki tvahi. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. For one who desires to advance in spiritual life, attachment to material opulence and attachment to a beautiful wife are two great impediments. Such attachments are condemned even more than suicide. Therefore, anyone desiring to cross beyond material nescience must, by the grace of Krishna, be freed from attachment to women and money. When Maharaj Priyavrata became completely free from these attachments, he could again peacefully follow the principles instructed by the great sage Narada. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So Maharaj Priyavrata has come back to his natural position, his accomplished position of full Krishna consciousness, or let me say completely renounced Krishna consciousness, and the position he had, the same consciousness he had under the instruction of Narada Muni before he was instructed by Lord Brahma to take up management of the universe, which he did very dutifully for, who remembers, how long? 1,100 million years. 1,100,000,000 years. I think he's performed his duty. I think he's fulfilled his duty. So it's interesting, as I mentioned yesterday in the question period, that he was reluctant to do it, to start doing it. He was very advanced on Gandhamana mountain. His father asked him, Swayambhuva Manu, but he was hesitant. He really didn't want to leave his position of renunciation in Bhajan. And Narada Muni was right there. But when Lord Brahma came down, and everybody honored Lord Brahma, and Swayambhuva Manu, and certainly Narada Muni, who's his disciple and son, and they deferred to him. And Narada Muni was basically, Lord Brahma was basically saying, no one can violate the orders of the Lord. And it was understood that he was carrying that order. And one of the orders of the Lord is that this world must be maintained. It must be populated. Even though it's a big headache for Brahma to take up that process when the universe starts. Anyone who reads the second canto will read how it wasn't exactly smooth going when he started to populate the universe. The Kumaras refused, and Brahma became very angry, and out comes Lord Shiva, and then he has, through his mental, what did he have to work with? His own mind. So he's creating these offspring. Some of them are demons. They come after him. He had to give up that mentality. And so it's not a smooth thing. As soon as you start dealing with the material energy, there are going to be difficulties, anomalies, and things can happen that you don't expect. But he was following the instruction of Krishna also. In other words, that you have to populate the universe, you have to manage the universe. This is his duty, and Lord Brahma is doing that. But he needs deputies, and these Prajapatis are some of his deputies, and these such as Uttanapada, and here we have Priyavrata. So Priyavrata is it. There's no one else to do the work, and so Brahma has prevailed upon him to take up the process. So he came down from the mountain and started managing, and And one of his more signal or amazing achievements was creating a second sun, so that there would be light in the southern hemisphere, or whatever you want to during the winter and the summer. So he was able to do that, which was quite amazing. And most amazing to me is the length of time he was engaged doing this, 1,100,000,000 years. So now, in the last few verses, and then it describes his wife, how he married his beautiful wife, Barhishmati, and he had these wonderful sons, and he seems to have, become entangled. But we know that, he's not entangled like an ordinary conditioned soul. In fact, it's mentioned there that in order to perform all the necessary sacrifices, you need to have a faithful wife. And so that's part of the reason he got married. And necessary has his sons, who he's going to turn over the kingdom to. So in the last few verses, we've been hearing about how he's been lamenting how now he's got entangled, and he gave up his same consciousness he had with Narada Muni. And the impetus for renunciation has become very, very strong in his heart. And I think we can understand that the fact that it did is a result of his previous sadhana and his previous position that he had. This was an interval, maybe a long interval, but he's coming back to his coveted position of complete renunciation. And Prabhupada makes it very clear. He quotes the Shikshastika, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. That's the first process, is the cleansing of the mirror of the heart through the process of especially Sankirtan. And Bhava Mahadav Agni Devapadam. And in this way, the blazing fire of material life is extinguished. So that means that what feeds that blazing fire is our serial attachments and our effort to meet the desires caused by those attachments on the material side. And that can go on for many millions of births. Is that because, as we know, kama, material desire, is never satisfied and burns like fire. So it's a chain reaction. You engage with material things, and you get a sense gratification, and it plants a desire seed in your heart, in your subtle body, to do it again, to experience it again. Now, there's all kinds of anomalies and negativities and Prabhupada's famous use of inebrieties in the material sphere, but still, unless you have that input, you have an association of someone who's living on a different plane, who's finding pleasure not in sense gratification but in serving Krishna, there's no way of getting out. You're imprisoned by your own ignorance and chain, Prabhupada's immortal phrase, chain victimization of karma, one after another. So Priyavrata had the greatest association, Narada Muni, and we have the association, we have the input, we have the instructions from Narada Muni's descendants, especially Srila Prabhupada, who's carrying with him all of the strength and all of the presence of the previous acharyas. So this theme comes up again and again in our literature. On the one side is the attachments, the knots, oftentimes called like knots in the heart, Hridaya Granthi, that bind one life after life. And you can't cut them by any mundane process. The only way to cut them is through the sword of remembrance. The sword of remembrance. I was just looking at this book we put together some years ago, Dharma, the Way of Transcendence. It's just on that second chapter, text 1 to 21, I believe it is. 6 to 21. Very concise. Probably would quote these verses all the time. Beginning, Savai Pungsang Paro Dharma Yoto Bhakti Hokshadeya Hoituki Patiyata Yamasupasidati. It's the same theme. The sages of Naimisharanya wanted to know what is that Dharma by which the soul can be completely satisfied. You can't be satisfied in any kind of opulence or sense gratification in this world. By nature, it's temporary. Just by that temporariness itself is a source of great anxiety and dissatisfaction. Even if you're a billionaire, multi-billionaires, and you can see they don't know what to do with themselves with their billions. Oh, let's see if we can, have a whole space program all our own, So absurd. I'm just waiting for one of those rockets to blow up, with one of these billionaires in it. I mean, eventually their whole dreams blow up, right? What to do? Okay, we'll buy a yacht. They have these yachts,
hundreds of millions of dollars they spend on the yachts, you know. And you can imagine what goes on the yachts, you know. But it's desperate. It's pathetic. They're not getting, a slight fraction of the satisfaction that even sadhana bhaktas get. What to speak of the prema bhaktis? You know, at every moment you're relishing this relation with Krishna. Gopi bhava rasamatablati kallola magno mahur, a line from the Sixth Goswami song. They gave up their opulence. It's a perfect example. Chakvatuna mashesha mandala patisheni sada tuchavat. Rupa, Sanatan, Raghunath especially, they were very, very wealthy. They had everything at their command, you know, power and influence, to speak of money. But after being, that seed of bhakti had been planted by association with Lord Chaitanya, they didn't want any of it. They gave it up quickly, you know, without thinking, well, should I or shouldn't I? No, quick. Kakvaturna mashesha mandatabati. So that tuchavat, as extremely insignificant. And they became as poverty-stricken as it's possible to be. They didn't have their old clothes. They picked up rejected clothes, you know, and they're wearing this kopin and this and that, you know, kanta. And they didn't have a place to live, really, living under the trees, one after another. Of course, they're kalpavriksha trees. It's wonderful, but very, very austere. Eating, you know, whatever they could glean, a little madhukari, you know, this and that. And sleeping hardly at all, 1.5 hours. Maybe if that, but Gopi Bhava Rasamatavali, they was swimming and diving in the ocean of Gopi Bhava Prema. They had the highest wealth. The pleasure was constant. It wasn't like, oh, you know, now we have to do something else. No, that remembrance is constant. And they're just writing these wonderful, you know, books and sharing with each other. I remember the first time I went to India. And of course, you know, we'd come to Vrindavan and we want to go see Radha Damodar temple. And so those who had some experience with Parakram, they said yes. And Prabhupada explained to us, they would say how the Goswamis would meet here and they would share realizations with each other. You know, they're writing these books. You know, oh, listen to this one I wrote. You can imagine how they're enjoying, you know. So that's the alternative. So these verses, beginning with Savai Pungsam, what's the real Dharma? That which evokes pure bhakti, free of any material motive, ahaituki, and uninterrupted. That can bring full satisfaction to the self. And right away, next verse, isn't it? Vasudeva Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha, Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Shayirahoitika. By engaging in this devotional service, not yet on the pure platform, but the sadhana, Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha, Janayat Yashu, quickly it generates vairagya, detachment, which is essential. That's what he was describing in this verse we just read. Became detached. In other words, it doesn't that he grit his teeth and then physically separated himself and then was still dreaming about all these things. He really broke the attachment that he had for all these things. And of course, we understand that this is a lesson for us, that Priyavrata was on a special level. And what he had already accomplished was reawakening in him. That's what's happening. But for sadhaka bhaktas, it's described right there in the second chapter. Vasudeva, by engaging in service to Vasudeva, Krishna, when quickly Ashu develops vairagya, and jnana and knowledge, they go together. The real knowledge also evokes vairagya. Just like in this verse, it's described, he gave up his wife as if she were a dead body. You know, all right, that's pretty graphic. But really, even without formal marriage or anything, you can understand the reality of this. That we're just bags. What's that? Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridatuke. Kunape means a bag. It also means a corpse. You know, because this body is not alive, it's simply animated by the presence of the soul. As soon as that soul leaves, that very body is obviously not alive. So when you think about it, all of these descriptions, we don't dwell on these things, but it's important to hear them, is that's the actual nature of every body, whether human or any. It's a contraption full of different liquids and airs, and none of it is, all of it's like, disgusting. I remember, some of us remember in biology class, do they still do that? Where you cut open a frog? I couldn't do it. But maybe I did do it. I forget. I mean, I'm blocking out. But the thing is, it's just, there's nothing attractive about it. And so I understand, like the Buddhists, they have a certain meditation where I think it's they say, okay, imagine it's transparent and you can see through the skin and you see the bones and you see the attraction. It's just an aura. It's something it's Maya. It isn't, and immediately breaks if you can do that. What's attractive about that? Body flapping around, with all those horrible substances inside. But that's not enough. There has to be the attraction to Krishna. There has to be the attraction to things related to Krishna, devotees, because Maya is too strong. You'll give that up, or you'll be temporary. You'll say, okay, enough, I've had it, But then that seed is still there. It has to be purified, not simply on the basis of knowledge, but on the basis of bhajan, of actually getting Krishna's mercy. And that's why this Chaitodharvana Marjanam is all related to Harinam Sankirtan. Because as soon as you chant, especially in big kirtan with many devotees and enthusiasm and real bhakta is not just some game, you're associating with Krishna. And Krishna is all attractive. He's really attracting the soul away from this illusory demonstration that it's presented to you. And as soon as that attraction begins to develop, the proportionate distaste and dispassion grows for things material. Not just the opposite sex, but everything material. Especially material sounds. As you attract to the spiritual sounds, and you can realize this is all babble. What is that? Right at the beginning of the second canto, Shukadev praises the question of Maharaj Pariksit. So what should one do? What should one think of? What should one hear when death is approaching? He's going to die in 7 days. And Prabhupada makes it very clear. Who knows if we have even 7 days left? We're also condemned. We're also going. So this applies to us. So it's a very good question. This question leads to realization for those who speak the answer, those who hear. But those who have no Atma Tattva, no interest in these things, they have millions of subjects for hearing. And all of those subjects just keep you more tightly bound to this world. And then he describes the attachment, the ordinary attachment. What do they do with their time? Nidraya hriyate naktam. At night, sleeping too much. Or having sex. Nidya viyate naktam vivayena cha bhavayak. And during the day, working very hard to make money. Divachartahiya rajan kutumba baranenava, for supporting the kutumba, the family. Work hard during the night, and the weekend go shopping. Well, nowadays you don't have to wait. You come home, go shopping on Amazon. But it's just a deepening web of attachments and illusions and suffering, anxiety, because you're building this little house of on sand, and there's so many dangers. This whole pandemic has really shown people the fierce side of Maya. That all of your dreams and all of your construction and everything you have built to try to ward off death and be happy can be destroyed by this little invisible virus that's not even alive, but that threatens everything, the economy, your life, And the greatest effect of this is a mental health, people's mental health. They're becoming depressed and anxious, And they think, it's over now, but it's not really over. There's another variant that's threatening. I don't want to think about it. If I'm through with the masks, it's not working. It's just going to keep on going. So that's what material life is in general. Even without the pandemic, Everybody is still condemned. So how can we place our faith and our energy all in relation to these material bodies, these material relationships? I just listened to a lecture. Robert, he speaks on this theme often. He gives a Bengali saying, which I don't remember, I don't know. But the gist is that there's several ways of it going. It says, someone's building a house, right? And someone says, "Oh, you're building a nice house. Why are you building a house?" So that when it's all completed and it's nicely done and everything's built, I'm going to set it on fire. What are you crazy, man? You know, you build your house and you want to live in it. But that's actually what we're doing. Have all of these dreams and plans, you know, and most people are living hand to mouth, you know. But there's a certain select group, you know, within the 7 billion people on the earth who have some facility who can try to, you know, build something. But whether it's just a big family or it's a big house or it's a big business or a big name, whatever you may get, it's all doomed. It's going to be destroyed by the force of time. Either when you leave it through death, or before then, when the pandemic comes and the whole thing gets threatened. And you know, what happened to my happiness? What happened to my success? What happened to my name and fame? So you see how the whole thing is absurd. A lot of effort, and it ultimately comes to actually absolute zero. And in fact, without any knowledge of the law of karma and you know what's a sin and what's not a sin, people inevitably they dig themselves a big hole in which they then jump in, and who knows when they'll come to the human form of life again. So the alternative is here, and so many wonderful accounts we've been hearing, and it's the same principles are enunciated all the time. And in this series of verses, he talks about how, you know, within Varnashram, now that's very pertinent because the idea was that there are certain social facts and certain, you know, structure that is created by Krishna, right? He says in the Bhagavad Gita, Chaturvarnyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagasha. This is my creation, this Varnashram. Why? Because Krishna wants human society to be organized in such a way for the upliftment of everyone so that they can make some progress coming back to me. He's concerned when Dharma becomes disrupted in society. That's why that famous verse is there. Yadaya dahi dharma saglana bhavati bharata. When there are dharma saglani, discrepancies in Dharma, at that time I descend. I manifest myself. Why? In order to reestablish Dharma, protect the devotees, annihilate the miscreants. So why should he go through all this trouble? Because he hasn't forgotten his relation with us, although we've forgotten our relation with him. We're his children. He wants that there be peace and prosperity, and most important, that there be Dharma within society where people are moving toward devotion to him, so they can come back home, back to guided. This is Krishna's desire. And all of the avatars, and what to speak of Krishna himself, Lord Chaitanya, they have that motion. They're oceans of compassion. What is that? The end of the 5th chapter. Bhaktaram yakatapasam sarvaloka mahesharam sudidam sarvabhutanam jatpamam shantam richati. You can be peaceful when you don't try to grab your little portion of the material energy and enjoy it, but you understand that Krishna is the ultimate enjoyer. Bhaktaram, of all sacrifices, all austerities, everything. He's the controller. And most important, he's your best friend. Sudidam sarvabhutanam. He's in the heart of everyone. Now this is an interesting point because when I was thinking about this recently, that I remember, so many of you may remember, when it all came out, that the NSA is spying on everyone. They're reading your emails, right, and they're listening in on your conversations. You know, now people don't like to think of that when they're having a conversation, but it's still true. They're trying to be all-knowing, like the super soul. And why does it freak people out? Because we don't have faith that they have our best interest in mind. They're not Krishna. They're not the super soul. They have their nefarious things, and we have our things we want to hide, and we don't think that they're going to be very kind if they find out about them. And oh my God, right? But devotees, we know, And that's part of our philosophy, that Krishna is always there as a super soul. He understands all our thoughts, our motivations, and so forth, right? And that's meant to be, that's meant to bring us to peace, right? When we understand Krishna's in our heart. Because he's the Surit, he has no personal motivation in doing that. He is very concerned about our welfare. He's our best friend. That's what Surit means. Your ever well-wisher. Prabhupada sign, ever well-wisher. Right? So therefore, he's trying to guide us. He's trying to give us intelligence, how we can come to him. But we're stubborn and we're not taking it. And we're using that intelligence to manage this world. So therefore he comes from outside, because we're too covered to see inside, come from outside as the Shastra and as the Guru or Gurus in order to try to penetrate our thick covering of illusion. And the fortunate souls are those who let some of that light in. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master enlightened me, opened my eyes with an instrument, literally, forced them open. It's just a shalakya, that's what it is. In other words, he's doing everything he can in order to turn our attention toward Krishna and develop attachment for the pastimes of Krishna, which we read this morning. That quote is those that were here from Mangalarti. Should we think of Krishna's pastimes when we're chanting Hare Krishna? Prabhupada said, yes, absolutely. Well, I think the question was, is it wrong? He said, no, it's right. It's the right thing to do. We're meant to come to the point where everything reminds us of Krishna, Krishna's pastimes. What's the point of understanding this is Krishna's energy? So then when we see the light of the sun, we taste the water or any liquid, in other words, that will remind us of Krishna. We'll think of Krishna. But you can't do that when you're trying to compete with Krishna. You want to forget, because that Krishna is the real owner and enjoyer. That's our whole disease. So we have to systematically train the mind to remember that and to live it. Meaning that, okay, all the food stuff is meant for Krishna. Therefore, when we prepare it, we're meant to think of Krishna. He'll be the enjoyer. And do it nicely. Now we know that Krishna is Bhavagrahi Janardana, that he sees the mood. So the first time someone cooks the jalebis or any sabji, it may not come out just right. But if it's cooked with, you want it to come out right, you're trying your best, he'll accept it anyway. He'll accept a little flour, But over time, part of that devotion is learning how to cook properly. So that is pleasing to Krishna, and the prasadam is pleasing to the devotees, and it's transcendental. So that's the idea, is that it's all a question of purification, the whole process we have, which is very encouraging, because it means that we already have the perfection within us. We just have to purify ourselves from all of the dross we've accumulated for millions of births, material desires and fears and anxieties, and follow the process as it's been given, and gradually we can develop that or discover that original process. It all comes, this series of verses culminates in the last 5 verses. The whole thing is varnashram, but the whole purpose of varnashram is to please Krishna. And therefore, you may remember this verse, tasmai ekena manasa bhagavan sattva shrotavya kyutitabhya dhyaya puja nityada. Therefore, even within varnashram, all the members are meant to, with one pointed attention, hear about, chant about, worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhagavan Sattvatam Padi. What does that produce? That produces remembrance. That results in remembrance. And now, what he explains there is that, so then with one point of attention. And then the result is, Anurudyasena yukta karma grunti nabandhanam. Here you get the grunti again, the knots. This Anurudyasena is the sword of remembrance. Anudhyana means remembrance of Krishna, through basically hearing and chanting and serving, as he described. And what's the result of that remembrance? It's like a sword. Karma grunti nabandhanam. It cuts the karma, it cuts the material attachments, the knots in the heart. Chindandi kovidastasa konakoya kataratim. Who would not be attracted if he's intelligent? This is the cure for the pandemic of ignorance that we're suffering. So, But then the key is, well, how do I get that attraction for hearing? That's because you have to be attracted to hear in order to sharpen that sword. So that's a shushu shoshadadhanasya vasudeva kacharji syan mahatsavya vipra punya tirthana shevana. By hearing and serving the great devotees, those who are pouring forth this Krishna Katha nectar constantly, which that's their greatest pleasure, and that's what they love to do, glorify Krishna. So we have to hear in the right mood. Shusho means ardent hearing, submissive all reception, and with faith, shradhanasya vasudeva katha ruchi. So you get the taste, the attraction for Krishna Katha, Vasudeva Katha. And Syan, it becomes about by serving the Mahatmas. Syan Mahatsvaya Vipra, Punya Tirtha Nishevanat, who are themselves moving tirthas, places of pilgrimage. And then once you get that taste, then comes the last part. Shinbatam Sakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Kuridindakso Yabhadrani Vidunoti Surit Satam. Again, this word Surit. Krishna is the best friend of the devotee. He's in the heart. And he says, oh, they're hearing about me in the proper way, from the proper source. Okay, so vidunoti literally means cleansing. He cleanses the heart. Chaitodharpanamarjana. Same process. And then what happens? So it becomes somewhat cleansed. Then we have that Nashtaprayashu Bhadreshu verse. That when it's somewhat cleansed, you come to the point of nishta. It corresponds to that ladder from faith to love. Haro shada, tataksaro sanga, tabhajana kriya, tato anartha nivritti syat, tato nishta ruchicita. Anartha nivritti simply means cleansing. And then what's that nishta? That's the same faith that Lord Chaitanya speaks of, defines it. Shraddha shabde, vishwas kohe, suddhidho nishchoy, Krishna bhakti korle sarva karma krita hoy. That real faith is defined as complete, absolute conviction that just by practicing the principles of devotional service, the sadhana bhakti, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, that all my aspirations will be fulfilled. It's not that I do my bhakti and then I, do something else. And I'm just doing bhakti, and within that can be maintenance of family. Certainly, that's there. But that everything is within the compass of devotional service. That's real faith. So that's nishta, right? Just by bhakti. And then you go on, and then at that platform, tadara dastamo bhava kama lobharayaschaye, that the lower modes of nature are becoming less and less influential on you. You're coming more and more to the mode of goodness and the mode of pure goodness. Stitam sattve prasidati, and then you're fixed in goodness and moving to pure goodness. And at that stage, then evam prasanna manaso, you become naturally joyful, because that's our natural state. That's why we keep striving for it in the material world, because we're anandamaya abhyasat. But we're looking, there's that phrase, forgive me, looking for love in all the wrong places. We're looking for ananda in all the wrong places, looking for prema in all the wrong places. So that at this stage, the evam prasanna manasa, the mind naturally becomes joyful, like brahmabhuta prasanatma, Evam prasanna manasa, Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga, by the process of Bhagavad Bhakti, by devotion. Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam. And then you get direct perception of the truth. And Prabhupada explains what that is in the next verse. Mukta Sangha Sajayate, and one is completely liberated at that point, free of any attachment to the material world and fully attached to Krishna. And then comes the culmination. Vidyate Vidya Grantis, Chidyante Sarva Sankshaya, Chiyante Jasakamane, Drishta Evatmanishvare. Which means that at that stage, all of your knots in the heart are cut asunder. Means no more material attachments. Chidyante sarva sankshaya, all of your doubts are eradicated. And all of your karma is eradicated when suddenly you get revelation in your heart. You see the Lord. You see your master. You see yourself, your own actual form, spiritual form, and you see Krishna. That's the last part of the verse. So that's the summary program. And I often thought, because Prabhupada quote these verses constantly, that this portion of the Bhagavatam is put right there, second chapter, first canto. It's a complete lesson. And I was thinking, Vyasadeva was thinking, well, these Kali Yugites, how are they going to get through all these 18,000 verses, So I'll put a whole little summary of the process right there in the second chapter. Even if that's as far as they get, they'll get the full lesson. So that's what we're seeing now with Priyavrata. he's come back to his completely renounced platform, and he's done his duty, and he was able to return to the path of Krishna consciousness and resume the position he had attained by the grace of the great Saint Narada. So we're also trying to resume that position. Otherwise, what's the point of going back home, back to Godhead? We fell down from there, so we're all trying to get back to our natural position. And then in that position, we'll see who we really are, and we'll see who you really are. We all have our place in the spiritual world. So I've gone over time. Is there any question or comment, locally or remotely? Dr. Ed, where's the mics? We have 2 mics. Oh, you got to push that on real. There you go.
There it is. My favorite analogy is building sandcastles on the beach.
Yes.
There's an annual event at Imperial Beach where they use backhoes. I mean, they create these elaborate things, and the tide comes in, whoosh, it's all gone. That's our situation. That's
and it's interesting
sandcastles.
because that's a perfect analogy, because I'm sure that there are pictures of previous events like that with some of the special ones. They probably have prizes and then the whole thing. And those who who get into it, they come back year after year, and they're anticipated, and it's advertised, and then they actually do it, and then they build it, and then they take their picture, and then it's washed away, and they have the picture left. This is material sense gratification. And all of that contemplation and stuff that it keeps you in Maya. In other words, you can't think that this is a completely useless waste of time, because you've already invested your emotions in it. You're famous by now. You have a name. In other words, all material life is like that. Unfortunately, it holds true for like families and dynasties and positions, what to speak of bank accounts or anything like that. It's completely ephemeral. Isn't that what we learned at the beginning of the Gita? Nasato vidyate bhava. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
It's in this point. I remember 2 years ago, myself and Jamal, we were swimming at La Jolla Coves.
Uh-huh.
And I was like joking around with Jamal. I was just like building this big pile of sand, and I was like, my wife, my kids, my bank balance, my cars, and then this wave would just come in and I was doing this for like 5-10 minutes, and this guy walks over and he just sat there and stared at me for like 2 minutes straight. And like Jamal was like, I think his whole life flashed before his eyes when I was doing that.
And then he took a book. No, I just.
Thank you. So, Prabhu, you're talking about...
hold it straight.
Yeah, you're talking about Priyavrata, that how he was engaged in family affairs and how he left the family affair and he became Krishna conscious. Obviously, he was Krishna conscious. And his activity has been praised in Bhagavatam. Of course, when you look at a Karda Muni and Devahuti, his Karda Muni activity is also praised. But Acharya considers the bhakti of Kardama as a Sakam bhakti.
As what?
As Sakama Bhakti,
Okay.
and at the same time, Priyavrata Bhakti is not a Sakam Bhakti. So what's the difference between these two Bhakti? Because Kardama was desiring something, but the moment he got a wife, which is beautiful as we can even think of, he just said, okay, I'm in meditation now, I don't care for you. And so he was not attracted to the sex or anything else. Then why his Bhakti is considered as Sakam, whereas Priyavrata Bhakti is considered as a pure Bhakti?
I think it's because what comes before, that Priyavrata had already ascended to a very high platform of renunciation. And he didn't really want to get into it. He didn't have a desire. I mean, Kardama at a certain point wanted to get married, right? But Priyavrata, he didn't want any of this. Instead, he says, okay, my desire is too strong, I better come back. It wasn't like that. He was ready to stay renounced. So he had reached a much higher platform. And he was assured, that we've been reading, that he'll be assured that, you'll be able to keep, the whole purports are like that. You'll be able to keep your Krishna consciousness even while you're doing this, So therefore, that's why I mentioned yesterday, where it's kind of graphic the way he himself, at first it's described, he got, with Barahishmati, and there was so much enjoyment going on, it was more and more, and with whom he had enjoyed so much sense gratifications right here. So but the difference was that you could say that it was Krishna's arrangement. In other words, he needed to have that so-called entanglement in order to do all the service he had. That comes up now. You need to have the wife and everything, to encourage him in his material activities. But it wasn't deeply embedded in his heart. Even though it went on for 1,100 million years, he was naturally, he never lost that advancement that he had. It was just waiting to be remanifested after he'd done his duty. So there's a different profile. It wasn't true of Kardama. He didn't achieve such tremendous renunciation and prema bhakti and then come down and do it. He was doing his meditation thing, and then he wanted to get married, and he did. And so that's the way I would see that. Is that it is a little, the way it's described here and the way he describes himself. But I think that as we understand, this is like what we find Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his songs or Narottam, I'm the lowest, I'm most attached. It's interesting, Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote an offering this year for Vyasa Puja, where he's also getting into that mood. It's a kind of Dainya Bodhika. It's in the Nectar of Devotion, where you describe yourself in the lowest terms and, completely, with it. And, it's a kind of way of really, keeping oneself humble and looking at the fact that we're completely dependent on the Lord's mercy for maintaining any position of renunciation or being able to taste even one drop of nectar. And so to really see how fallen we are and how dependent we are on the Lord's mercy. That's the advantage of the Kali Yuga, in conjunction with the Sankirtan movement, is that how can we possibly think of, just look at these great souls, how long they lived and what the standard of renunciation was. How can we hope to go back to Godhead, where you have to be completely pure? Only by Trinadapi Sunichena, maintaining that attitude throughout, and always thinking, at any moment I could fall away. Let me pray, from the bottom of my heart. Please take me, Like I give that example. This is Rupa Goswami's prayers in the Utkalika Valari. This is one of the last, if not one of the last, of his works in the Stavamala. And near the end, it's a wonderful description, of Krishna and Radharani and so many things. But then at the end, he's praying in this mood. Pashapala Varinyanandana Vadametang Maharati Yuvam Bhavatu Pranayo Bhave Bhave Bhavatore Vipadam Mujeshame. Now he says bhave bhave, just like Lord Chaitanya does. Even after birth, it's just like we're going to keep coming back due to attachments or sins. So he says, O Radha Krishna, children of the best of coward men, this single boon I beg from you again and yet again. In all the countless births my endless sins will make me meet. Let all my love flow toward your luscious lotus feet. And then the next verse he continues with it. Sahanta sandra kadona sudha jari purnamana sadado prasidatam. Durjanetra, Dishatang Vater Nija Prekshana Pratibhavaschatamaphi. It says, my dear Lord, Radha and Krishna, alas, Hanta Sandra Karuna Sudha Jari, the waterfall of your intense compassion and mercy is overflowing from your hearts. This fallen soul, Durjana, he says, please let me have just a hint of attraction for your lotus feet as an assurance of some future darshan, some future, In other words, he's painting himself as very fallen and neglected and disqualified. But if you just be merciful and give me just a little attraction for your lotus feet, that'll be enough for me. So that kind of mood, when we chant the holy name, that's really meant. That keeps us on the safe side. We can't start to develop the false pride and the things which can lead to ultimately as fall down or falling away or being more, getting covered again. So this is we see this now in Priyavrata. What is this? I become so attached, In other words, he's recognizing after all he's expressing his ardent desire to be back where he was before, and to give up this entanglement. I'm not going to say attachment because ultimately he wasn't attached, but so that's the difference I think between Karma and Priyavrata. He'd already achieved the highest. But then that's two. Yeah.
Ask second question or it's too late?
Okay, but can I answer it tomorrow? No, I'm just go ahead. Go ahead.
So it's a very short question. So Priyavrata has invented a new sun, totally a new sun. Now Bhagavatam says there's only one sun which is revolving around the Loka mountains. What happened to the second sun? There is no history of the second sun.
Priyavrata, he was
So it's already
maintaining
there.
it.
It's there.
No, it's not there anymore because Priyavrata's not there. Yeah, the one sun is there. Thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.
Thank you very much, Dravida Prabhu.
Hari Bol. Glories to Prabhupada.
Haribol.